Hey there, welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
So today we're jumping into something pretty significant happening right now in the UK Parliament.
Right.
The illegal migration bill. It's back in the House of Lords for another round of debate.
That's right. And it's causing quite a stir.
Exactly. We've gathered a fair bit of information, sources specifically looking at this latest stage for our deep dive today.
hmm
And our aim really is to cut through some of the noise, pull out the key things you need to know about what's happening, why it matters, and, well, what might happen next.
It's definitely a complex situation, a real intersection of law, politics, and human impact.
Absolutely. So, based on the sources we've looked at, let's start with the basics. What's this bill actually trying to do
Mhm.
at its heart?
Well, fundamentally, the aim is to deter people from entering the UK without authorization,
Hmm.
particularly focusing on those arriving in small boats across the channel. The core idea is to detain individuals who arrive this way, make them ineligible to claim asylum here, and then remove them. Remove them to what the government deems a safe third country.
And the sources mention Rwanda specifically in that context.
Yes, the plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda is presented as sort of the prime example of how this safe third country policy would work under the bill.
Right. And this isn't the first time the Lords have looked at it, is it? It's been through the Commons already.
Correct. It passed the elected House of Commons, but the Lords, acting as that revising chamber, they've pushed back. Repeatedly, actually.
Oh.
So this latest round is part of what's often called parliamentary ping pong.
Ping pong.
Yeah, where the bill bounces back and forth because the Lords are insisting on changes, amendments that the Commons hasn't agreed to.
Okay, so this is where our sources really point to the disagreements. What are the specific sticking points? What are the Lords really digging their heels in about?
There are a few key areas, mostly centered on, fundamental rights and legal principles. A really big one is the power for potentially indefinite detention.
Indefinite.
Well, the concern is that individuals, including vulnerable people, could be detained for very long periods if their removal can't happen quickly. Critics argue this clashes with basic rights to liberty.
And I think the sources mention specific groups they're worried about, vulnerable people.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Another major point of contention is whether there are enough protections for specifically children and also victims of modern slavery or trafficking.
Okay.
The Lords have been trying to insert amendments to create clearer safeguards, arguing these groups could be seriously harmed by the bill's broad approach.
You mentioned broad approach. What about the sweeping ministerial powers the sources talk about? That sounds significant.
It is. This refers to concerns that the bill gives government ministers quite a lot of power to make decisions or bypass certain legal processes, perhaps limiting the court's ability to review those decisions.
Hmm.
So the Lords are worried this could, undermine the rule of law and the usual checks and balances.
How's the government taking all this pushback from the Lords?
Well, the sources suggest the government sees this bill as absolutely central to its strategy. Stopping the boats, disrupting traffickers,
So they're standing firm.
pretty much. They argue the measures, while tough, are necessary and justified to control borders. They seem determined to get it through without major changes.
So with this sort of standoff, what happens next? What's this ping pong process actually involve? And what are the risks highlighted in our sources?
Okay, so the bill, with the Lord's latest amendments, goes back to the Commons. MPs vote. Accept, reject, or maybe offer alternatives. If they reject the Lord's changes again, it goes back up to the Lords.
And this could go on for a bit.
It can, though there are limits eventually. But the sources also flag pretty significant legal risks down the line.
Like court challenges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Potential clashes with international law, like the Refugee Convention, specifically the right to seek asylum, and maybe the European Convention on Human Rights. The sources strongly suggest court battles are almost inevitable if the bill passes in its current form.
Which could potentially derail parts of it even after it becomes law.
Potentially, yes. The courts could find certain provisions unlawful.
Okay, stepping back a bit. Why should someone listening care about this, parliamentary back and forth, this ping pong?
Well, because it's much more than just procedure. You're really seeing a live debate about fundamental principles.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you understand the government's direction on migration, sure, but also how Parliament, both the elected part and the unelected part, grapple with these difficult issues, and, crucially, the potential real-world impact on people. All these arguments are laid out in the sources we're looking at.
It really puts the spotlight on the tension between political goals and legal or human rights obligations.
Precisely, it's that friction playing out.
So, wrapping this up, based on our deep dive into these sources today, what are the absolute key things for our listener to watch out for next?
I'd say keep an eye on which specific Lord's amendments they choose to really fight for this time, especially anything related to detention limits or those protections for children and trafficking victims.
Okay.
And then further down the road, definitely watch how the courts respond if and when legal challenges are brought. That could be the next major chapter.
It definitely feels like, as the sources suggest, this is more than just legislation. It's got these deeper legal and, well, even moral dimensions.
Yeah, it raises some fundamental questions for everyone to think about, really.
Absolutely. Lots to consider there. Well, thank you for unpacking all that with us.
Pleasure as always.
And thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.